While we're waiting, we have both a review of the agenda items and bylaws. I'm not sure we're getting the bylaws today. We've got a big agenda, so we'll see how far we get. But if we don't, we'll pick it up next time. So, but if anybody has comments they want to make and we have time, by all means. I think we should wait for Mike.
So we put that aside and then we're going with the meeting review. Okay.
I'll read the,
Oh, this is just the, these are just the.
check 1, 2. Mike Morton. Mike Morton. You got a voice for radio. I got a face for radio. That's what I told my wife the other day. She told me, she goes, I love your voice. I love to hear you talk. That's what my wife says. And I said, yeah, but I got a face for radio. What's that mean? I said, think about it.
My Mike Morton impression.
We're waiting for Mike. See if I can rest him out.
Feels good right now.
Okay. Got the air on.
That's good. Are you?
I know the air.
That's good. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah.
See how I just take up half of
You got it.
did that.
Fine, I'm
Okay.
spreading over to John.
Here's the man.
Hey, Mike. Hey.
Mike.
Good, folks, let's get started with the working session here. And the first is a review of the meeting agenda, and we have two hearings tonight. And the first one is Rico Hamlet, so-called Rico Hamlet. We have heard quite a bit about the Rico Hamlet over the last few months. We've had presentations on it. There's been a couple of public meetings. Lori, I know you were attended one of them, and did anybody else? You attended, right?
Yep.
And we have Lori's notes. Did you all get those?
Yeah.
Lori's notes for the meeting. Were very helpful. Appreciate it. So let's open the floor and let's start talking about it. I think it's time for us to make a decision on this one, and if we can. So, There are, I'd like to remind everybody that we have 14 different standards. They're zoning review standards that we are supposed to consider. We're supposed to consider during our deliberations. They are repeated in the packet that Mike produced and published last week. Of those 14 standards, there are 3 that are not applicable. And so there are really 11 standards. Now, we can walk through every one of them. We don't have to. We can talk conceptually because I think we'll reach them as we talk, but I hope you all have considered them. I've considered them quite a good deal in detail. And and Mike, we have your comments regarding those standards, your analysis in there. And so I very much appreciate that. Is there any of that you would like to talk about right now? Does anyone want to talk about any? I'll go ahead and start. I think one of the concerns, and it was brought up at the last time, was standard number 3 has to do with consistency with the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan, one of the factors, and Mike, I think you, on your analysis of, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you read your analysis of number 3, standard number 3, consistency with the comprehensive plan?
Okay. So,
Policy and intent of the comprehensive plan.
number 3, right? Number 3 is whether the zoning proposal is in conformity with the policy and intent of the comprehensive plan. And what's written here says, the central intent of the comprehensive plan is to remain deliberately rural. To achieve this goal, the plan allows for pockets of density that are hidden from view and that provide permanent preservation of open space or create demand for preservation through the TDR program. The proposal adds almost 274 acres of hamlet to the city. Since 70% is required to be set aside as open space or civic space, the proposal will result in an additional 191 acres to be protected. The required buffers also would provide protection of over 5,000 feet of road frontages.
And I think that's correct. I think you've centered in on that part of it very well. And I don't think I don't have any issue with those items you put there. But there is another policy, another intent for mixed-use hamlets. If you look at the mixed-use hamlets, one of the items that pops out pretty considerably, and it also is in the UDC, is connectivity. And this came up the last time. Now, I think, John, you mentioned it last time. You talked a little bit about it. Would you like to talk a little more at this point?
Sure. Yeah, so I think with regards to what you're talking about, specifically pertaining to the 40 acres that is across Rico Road, with a hamlet, the idea behind a hamlet is that they be walkable and clustered, kind of promoting pedestrian walkability, where the 40 acres that's kind of across the way and being included in the proposal doesn't really promote the walkability aspect of what a hamlet is supposed to be. We can go into further discussion about that, but I think that's kind of really the long and the short of it.
I think that is an issue for us to discuss here today. There's another item that has happened since we last met, and that is we got the traffic study. And I hope you all have had a chance to review it. We've had plenty of opportunity to. Mike, what is your summary of the traffic study?
So, unfortunately, among all the papers that I carried in here is not the traffic study, but there are two things that I thought were notable in the traffic study. One is the actual recommendation of all the intersections that they looked at. None of the existing intersections were pushed into a level of service category, a lower level of service category that was not acceptable. The plan did recommend entrance improvements at the main entrance headed to the south in the main part of the hamlet, including a deceleration lane or right turn lane on southbound Rico Road and a left turn lane into the hamlet on the northbound Rico Road lane. So that would require the widening the road and putting some sort of median or striping in there, so there could be a left turn lane. Keep in mind too that Hopkins Road goes in the other direction. There were no additional lanes recommended for Hopkins Road, but the right turn lane or deceleration lane and the left turn lane on Rico Road. The other notable thing in the study is that it pointed out at the peak PM traffic times, the intersection at Rico Road and South Fulton Parkway is already at level E, I believe it was. If it were this development sort of pushing it over the edge, there might be a recommendation for them to make some changes. But as the traffic study noted, it's not uncommon on a stop controlled intersection on a high speed road for there to be peak level stacking, some waiting time at an intersection like that. So that's not an unusual situation. And again, it's not this development that's causing it to be at that low level of service.
Well, didn't it push it over to F rating? Or did I miss that? Did I read that incorrectly?
It did. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rico and South Fulton is going to be a problem, but it already is a problem. So it isn't a big surprise. But as far as Rico Road, the rest of it, it looks like the traffic study didn't say minor impact. Wasn't that what is? Will, do you remember?
I mean, it was basically letter for letter. Looked at their table, that's letter to letter compared to that one intersection. Got it.
Right.
I think overall it suggested pretty much like a minimal impact.
I guess it said the F rating would apply to peak hours on Rico Road.
In fact, peak afternoon hour, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's right.
peak afternoon.
Mhm.
So, yeah. At that intersection.
At that intersection,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
And while we're talking traffic study, Mike, the traffic study appeared to use existing data, all that talk of whether there was paving or not paving. When I read the study, it appeared to be using data from 2018. Is that correct?
If we can get him activated here, I think Robbie's trying to do that now.
I think if we're going to get outside, I'm fine to let that wait for the main meeting. We need to get information from outside.
We can do it again then
Yeah.
too. Let's do it again. I
Yeah.
think that's a good point. Let's do it again.
I think my question for Mike was going to be more, what should we expect? Should we expect a traffic study based on somebody out there with a clicker counting the traffic now, or should it be based on existing data?
Yes.
No.
Well, it's within 6 months. If they've got data within the last 6 months that they did for a previous study, that should be acceptable. But yeah, it should be recent data.
Recent data.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point of delaying it because the road was being paved. So we expected current data.
I think we should probably hear about that right now if we can.
Quick question.
Robbie, are you going to be able to cook him in? Okay.
His name?
Chris, do you want to ask him?
Mr. Garcia, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You may have to speak up just a little bit.
Sorry, I was setting up my microphone earlier.
So Commissioner Duncan had the question about the data that was taken. Was there, did you look at existing data from the 2018 study, or was there real-time data that was captured like within the last 6 months?
So I'm not aware of what 2018 study you might be referring to, but we collected the data ourselves on April 2nd of last month. Well, so basically as recently as within the last 40 days or so. So Wednesday, April 2nd, 2005, I'm referencing page 7 of my study. Got it here on the other monitor.
Will, is that unclear in the report?
I mean, I found it now. I found where it says that now. I just was
Okay,
reading it earlier. I thought it said 2018, but I do see now where it says collected Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. Yep, thank you.
and does anyone, it's Mr. Garcia, is that it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And he is with the company who did the traffic.
Does anyone
Traffic
have any, at this point, we can perhaps speak with him later too. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Garcia right now about the traffic study?
Only at it might be a minor point, but noting that it was only this one time that they came out for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, the only eyebrow raised for me was that this was a day that is typically, I'm pretty sure, falls within spring break for most of the schools in the surrounding area. So even though we have the report here, I would imagine it might be safe to assume that that traffic might be a little bit more increased because those would be peak traffic hours for our school commuters in the area, right?
Does he have any comment on that?
I'm trying to recall. I know that we looked at all the conditions to try to make them as similar as possible to what is typically seen. I don't recall if that was a spring break week. I'd have to go back and check my calendar.
I can answer that question. if
Doesn't
you'd like me to
GDOT
speak up.
publish blackout days for study dates?
You may have to repeat that, Mike.
Mr. Garcia, did you hear the question from staff? Mr. Morton, it's regarding the whether there's blackout dates that GDOT would have, and I don't know if you know whether there was a spring break that was going on in the area at the time.
No, we checked the specific dates for Fulton County Public Schools, and it's actually was the week of the 7th through the 11th when there was spring break. So we made sure to collect data before that on the 2nd, 1 week beforehand.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
That answer.
Chris, I have one more question. And I don't know if this is a time to ask, but during the community meeting at Vauxhall, there was some question about the possibility of relocating the main entrance so it's not on the curve. And it was suggested that you would have someone from your traffic team here that could speak to that. Would that be Mr. Garcia or would that be someone else?
I think so. Yes, the planner is on as well, I believe, but Mr. Garcia is probably the best to speak in terms of traffic safety concerns. So I don't know if you want to pose the question to him.
So the question that was at the community concern was the primary entrance. I guess that's the south side. That's the main part of the development, right, on the south side of Rico Road. Apparently on the curve, and then I guess it's sort of a natural speeding area, even though we don't have, that's beyond your control. But the question was, could there potentially be another location into the main development that would alleviate that safety problem?
And I think you were there, I wasn't, but I'm looking at your notes. The suggestion was to move it further away from the curve towards Longino Creek. Is that correct?
Yes,
Is that right?
that was
That was the
a
comment
thought.
from the audience.
So Mr. Garcia, if you heard Commissioner Searle's question, it's about shifting the main entrance away from the curve. I don't know if you feel, if you could speak to that just from a safety perspective. I don't know if that falls into more of a planning category or not, but just from what you know about the concept plan and the different potential conflict points, would you have an opinion as to whether that could be shifted, whether it would be beneficial to shift the driveway? I guess that would be further to the east along Rico Road.
So for the most part, this is something that does kind of, like you said, fall more into the whole planning category of things. But just looking at it from a traffic engineer standpoint, it is true that you are a bit limited on sight distance, sight visibility off to what's basically the left, in other words, to the northwest. So yes, it would probably be better if it's possible, and I'm not sure what other factors need to be considered as far as cost and feasibility are concerned. But if you could shift that main driveway to the east, that definitely decreases that sight distance concern. We also made sure to include a recommendation at the end of our study to provide or confirm adequate site distance per AASHTO standards. Obviously, we can't just go based off of either the camera footage or Google Street View imagery and say immediately, we think there's already enough or there's too little site distance. So we just kept it at that in our recommendations.
I was having a hard time with understanding, particularly the last part. I got most of it up to, yes, it might be a good idea to shift it to the east, but the rest of that I couldn't quite make out.
Could you, Mr. Garcia, could you repeat the last part there specifically about, I think, the conditions of the safety manual that you referenced?
Sorry if my microphone was giving problems. Again, I'm trying to adjust it to make sure you guys can hear me clearly. So yes, we included a recommendation at the end of our study on page 23 to provide or confirm adequate site distance per AASHTO standards. That's not something that we typically evaluate in a traffic study. We would need to be provided with surveying and site distance data to be able to confirm that ourselves. So all we did was provide that recommendation as an extra safety precaution. But you're definitely decreasing that concern that already exists by shifting the driveway to the east. That much is true.
Thank you for that.
What was the
It
last
sounds like
comment?
he said it would decrease the concern if it was shifted.
That's correct.
But not that we would know for sure if you could shift it. He probably doesn't have enough information to determine that. I heard something about Google line of sight, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you summarized that well. I think if Mr. Walsh is on, he may be able to provide a planning perspective from his vantage point. I don't, Robbie do we know if we have Tom Walsh on?
So I will say at the
Maybe
time of
Thomas?
land development permitting, we do require a site distance analysis. So that would get engineering review at that time. Based on what I just looked up, if what I just looked up is correct, it says 500 feet is what you would be the standard for a 45-mile-an-hour road. And I don't believe there is 500 feet there before the curve to the north. I think the designer was trying to line it up with the existing road
Right.
across the way. And if they can't meet that required distance, they would be required to move the intersection in the land development part of the process.
Well, I think we've heard enough that we would want to recommend that be evaluated regardless. And when are you saying was the right time for that, Mike?
When they're seeking to connect the road, basically they submit the design for the road. It's in the land disturbance permit, but that includes the entrance. So that would be their first land disturbance permit.
Is that your understanding of what you would want to do? You would want to evaluate that at the time?
I think that makes sense. Yes.
Okay. We can come back to that. That may need to be considered if we get that far as a condition.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I absolutely think it's relevant at this point. Like I say, we would certainly have the review, but if they are going to be required to move the intersection, that should be part of what we're thinking about, right? Where is it likely to go, and is that an acceptable location as well? I think they'd have to move it closer to the creek. I think they could get 500 feet without having a problem with the creek. Today, just doing a really informal measurement, it was over 200 feet, maybe as much as 300 you could get there in the right of way. That was very informal currently, so they would have to move it down maybe another couple hundred feet, maybe a little bit more, but that wouldn't get them into the creek buffers or anything. So
Is this something that could be done before it gets to city council? This evaluation? I don't mean.
They'd have to hire engineers to get a look at it. We look at both vertical and horizontal
Got it.
site.
And Mike, what I looked at initially was their phase 1 and phase 2 in the current drawing has a road connecting to phase 4 that looks like it crosses the creek. So I was thinking that on the other side of phase 4, that would probably be the entrance. And I didn't know if that was feasible to bring that much, the whole side of the development on that road crossing that creek. So it probably would take some time for you guys to consider that, is what I'm saying.
I would think that the way it should be done is to be a condition as to whatever is the safest route, and to have engineers that as pursuant to zoning approval, a condition that is with the land disturbance permit, that that particular driveway be evaluated by engineers for the safest route, and that it be placed within, in their professional judgment, the safest place.
Um,
Walsh, can I make a
I think
comment?
that's.
I think that's Mr. Walsh there. Yeah, Tom, if you could speak up if you could.
Yes, it's about, right now it's currently about 430 feet from the tangent. It would need at least to meet the 500-foot criteria, about another 70 feet towards the north, heading north on that road on Rico. So it is feasible. What we did was we were matching up the intersection that existed. So that usually is what an engineer, traffic engineer, will want to see, is to match up the two intersections. So you're not having a conflict of the two entries at that point. So it could be moved to the 70 feet or whatever distance is determined by the civil engineer when we get to that point. But that could be a condition of the plan.
Safety does seem to be the driving concern there. While we've got you all there, and if anybody else has questions on that, we can certainly add to this, but the engineering letter, we did get an engineering letter, and that's part of the packet, and that was in response to the questions about the distance and feasibility working in the right of way. And it seems to me that it answers those questions, but I want to ask folks if they have any further questions about that, or if that did in fact answer the questions. Will, I think you were.
Yeah, I would say it was a partial answer. I mean, they definitely spoke to the sanitary, they spoke to the water, and they spoke to the need for right-of-way acquisition. But they didn't do all of those things for all of those things. They gave linear footages for the water, but not for the sewer, and talked about the right-of-way in the context of the water, but not the. That said, I think just the information we have in that letter kind of reinforces what I think a lot of us were speculating, is that this is a long way to go for utilities. And either one of these utilities, if it's not there, is going to prevent the development from occurring. So it only would take one of these not working to make the entire thing not viable. So I definitely have questions about the viability of the development, reading what we have gotten.
It's a long way. Go ahead, please.
It is, and basically what we did was we flipped the motion over to the folks who wrote the letter, the professional, and just said, hey, do you see any concerns here? And is this, could you address specifically, we need this in writing, and basically, over the phone it's not a problem. Yeah, we can write a letter to that effect. And we understand, we don't know what the exact cost will be. We understand it is going to be costly, but the developer understands that, appreciates that, and understands it will be just a part of the cost of the development. From what we understand, it's very feasible, and we'd have expected the engineer to raise a concern if they had one. The feedback we got that it wasn't going to be a concern. It was feasible. So it's just a matter of cost, and that's just something that will be taken into account as the overall project scope and budget.
On the diagram that was attached to the engineering letter, it looks to me, and maybe I'm looking at this wrong, that the only part of the development they're showing is the south side.
I'll have to refer.
And perhaps I'm just looking at it wrong, but it doesn't look to me like they had depicted the north side, the 30 acres or so on the north side.
Yes, that's right. Basically, we just told them the intersection of Rico and Vernon Grove, and said that's, which is being the furthest point away. I would see it could be relevant if it were, I would think if it were switched, they were switched around, but the distance, which I think was the relevancy of what the question was, how far, that is the furthest distance away.
Is the intention to hook up the north side to water and sewer?
Well,
too?
actually, if those are single family homes, it may be that those would have septic. I don't know if that would meet code, but if the line's essentially going to pass there anyway, so I think you could probably do it either way.
The measurement point is beyond both entrances.
No, I was just curious that it was lacking from and I wanted to clarify what the thinking is, and it sounds like it's not certain that they would be connected.
I don't think so. I think that you could, with those bigger lots, that you could have, that you could do it with septic.
How many lots are planned over there? And the reason I ask that is I'm seeing the number 20
That's
pop up like in the traffic study. Is
right.
that what's
Yeah.
proposed?
That's what I think is on the concept plan.
And there was also questions about that at the community meetings, and also to John's comment we haven't addressed yet,
We haven't.
the orphan over there.
Yes,
and
and if we want to do
possibilities
that
for other
now,
things.
Well, in a minute, but it's
Okay.
20 units, right?
yes, that's what it's
It's 20
currently.
units. I think that's the initial questions I have, Chris, but maybe some of you all have additional questions for him at this point. We can have more opportunity for it, so I think you could probably sit down at this point. Mike, was there a department head that wanted to say something at this point?
Oh, so I've had meetings with chief of fire, chief of police, and public works, and in particular in the conversation with the chief of police, we were talking about the number of lots on the north side. He was concerned about the potential golf cart traffic entering Rico Road, which would not be allowed at that speed. Golf carts are not allowed. We talked then about possibly just having a path that connects. But what we talked about, we anticipated that the number of lots there might be changed by condition by planning commission or city council. And if it's a small number of lots, a path might not be necessary. It's really, then it becomes kind of this non-issue if you only have one or two houses maybe up there. But if it is indeed a neighborhood, having a path connection with a crossing that can be somewhat controlled, you can have a little bit of traffic calming, maybe a speed table, stop signs for the path traffic. In Georgia law, of course, cars have to yield to pedestrians, but bikes on a crossing or golf carts on a crossing have to yield to cars. And so you'd have stop signs on the path. Cars would pass. They would wait then for a clear way to cross. So you just have the short crossing, small crossing time, rather than letting the traffic or tempting the traffic to go out on the road where they're not supposed to be in the first place. So if you're going to have many lots, the recommendation was to require that path and that crossing. But if you're not going to have many lots, then
Where's
not
the
many.
path and crossing you're talking about?
Sorry, where would it
Where
be?
is the path and
So
crossing?
it's not shown on the plan, but it would be those two, the north side and the south side line up,
So you're
right?
talking about crossing Rico Road?
Crossing Rico Road, that's right.
And you'd allow golf carts to cross on Rico Road? Is that what you're saying?
They could potentially cross, not drive on the road, but go across the road potentially.
Well, that's an accident.
It's a safety concern.
That's
So
safe.
we're now talking about connectivity.
Yeah. So Mike, question.
We do have one of those directors here with us. If you wanted to hear from him directly, I don't know if he had anything he wanted to say about this in particular.
The plans on Tuesday, so we're still reviewing. Our primary concerns, of course, are for water. You're talking about mixed use and the need to meet both commercial and residential We're concerned for ingress and egress points.
Water for fire protection.
That's correct.
All
Fire
right.
suppression. And then street, naturally, always concerned for width, with traffic flow, so that emergency vehicles can always pass. You can't inhibit that movement. And in that formula is included, well, what's the grade? What's the surface? What are the turning radius? How do we maneuver within the full footprint or a specific area?
And these issues are all addressed specifically in the land development process. Yeah.
Correct.
Water pressure, is that an issue? Is water pressure an issue?
It is. It is because as you look at the type of structure, the number of structures, and a guesstimate of their load, fire load, we refer to it as, what are the contents of that structure? You calculate for a minimum required fire flow. So you know you are going to need a certain amount of GPM with certain circumstances to fight an initial fire attack. And when I say circumstances, I'm referring to the potential for other demand on the water, domestic demand, to reduce that GPM at the time of an incident occurring. And so it's very relevant, as to the size of the main and the amount of water volume present there.
Are there any questions for Chief Brett?
No, I do have a question for Mike though.
Thank you, Chief.
So Mike, as far as the crossing, is it the intent of the crossing to address the connectivity? And if it is that within code? Meaning,
Yes, I mean, we intend to have a path network throughout the city, and those would have to cross streets in many places. So, yes. Again, they would be as we discussed with the chief. Of course, no engineering has been done on this, this crossing, right? You'd have to have site distance analysis, just as we would for an entrance. But again, stop controlled on the pedestrian side, or for any motorized or anything else, any other vehicles, right? They would be stopping, have a chance to check for traffic and wait for a clearing, and then go only when it's clear.
so it would be okay for the golf carts to cross Rico Road?
Potentially.
Does the number of units over there affect the need for a path? The number of units on the north side, we planned at 20, right?
Right. Yeah, I would say with 20, certainly we would want to require a pedestrian alternative to meet the desire for connectivity.
Is there a number where that would diminish for you?
I don't have a number. I don't have no. A very small number would mean not requiring anything, but I don't have a threshold that's in the code or something that we're required to enforce the number. Although I will say that the hamlets are supposed to have paths networks throughout, right? And generally, you would expect a hamlet to connect uses, even if it's open space on the other side of the street. It could be open space that's activated for use by the residents. You would want to have a path crossing
On the interior of the
for
hamlet.
that as
though.
well. Correct.
Right.
Correct. Right. Even if it's not residences or commercial uses, it might be a park. It might be, there are a number of things that it might be where you would still want access across the street.
Mr. West, did you have something you wanted to say?
Thank you. Yes. The one close example, as I mentioned I think the last meeting, is Peachtree City. You go through Peachtree City and those golf carts are crossing major streets all the time. Maybe it's somewhat culturally there. I think folks have just gotten used to, hey, watch out for kids on golf carts, because I was over there having dinner the other night and there were young kids driving golf carts, but people knew to look out for them. But that being said, based on the feedback that we heard at the community meeting, and as well as from several of you folks at the last meeting, the applicant is open to shifting, upon your conditioning, to shifting these units to the south side and just not have the north side.
And would you then take the north side as open space?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and shift the credits.
I think that's worthy of consideration. I think it's worthy of consideration. And Mike was raising uses on the north side. There are certain uses that are allowed, like farming, for example, in open space is a good example of it, but,
Agriculture
well,
and,
agriculture, yeah,
and
agricultural
horse
usage.
equestrian.
So you are open to shifting the 20 units to the south side?
That's correct.
All right.
Based on your condition. If you make it a condition, we're open to that.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? We probably have another matter to discuss, to work through, but I don't want to cut it off at this point if there are other issues that folks would like to work through. And let's move on to the next item, which is the
Special
the
use.
proposal for a special use permit and a concept plan approval for a gas station in the historic Crossroads, Campbellton Historic Crossroads District. I think we all have figured it out by this point because of your good edits or your good package, Mike, but this came before the city council back first in 2018, I believe. You can go ahead and sit down for a second. We'll, if we have questions, I will ask you, but this is just the working session. We'll definitely want you to speak at the next one for sure. But it came in front of the city council back in 2018, and the city council, I believe, Mike, staff was not in favor of it, of the special use permit of the variance.
Sorry, I don't recall the staff recommendation on the variance. I think it was probably against, there was a rezoning, a special use permit, a variance, and a concept plan. The rezoning included language that staff was against. I believe the special use permit staff was in favor of.
So some part of it, staff objected to,
correct.
and planning commission objected to it, and city council approved the special use permit, the variance, and the variance was specifically focused on the location of the canopy of the pumps.
That's correct.
Right.
The code.
And maybe parking too?
No, the parking was part of the part of that zoning language section that staff was against.
Okay, and so that's right. So, but the variance did apply to that too.
Not the variance per se.
Okay, the variance was just the location of that.
Correct, just the location of the pumps.
And since that time, the special use permit has expired, the concept plan approval has expired, the variance is still effective, correct?
Correct.
So I think we all know that, but I wanted to state that to begin with. So I'll open it up to discuss. There are probably a few things I will also say this, I think my sense of it is that the applicant has been very open about the concept of taking input on architectural design to try to be consistent with a vision of the Campbellton Rico Crossroads. And that's appreciated. It's appreciated, that willingness. And I heard that at the city council work session, and I know that is appreciated as well. However, there are probably some other issues. So does anyone want to?
Sure, I have a question. So Mike, I guess my question would be, okay, I understand in 2018, special use was granted. And so the special use did expire. So the question would be the variance. So the variance and the special use are tied together, correct? So
They are, certainly the variance is about the use included in the special use permit. That's right. That's right.
Right. So I guess I was wondering, why is the variance still active and not expired?
Right. Simply the code, my interpretation, the code is explicit about the expiration of special use permits. It was at the time 36 months.
Right.
It's currently 24 in the current language. And the variance does not have any expiration language. So the idea being, variances are really only supposed to be approved, or conceptually anyway, they are to be approved when there's something unique about the size, shape, or topography of the property that creates a hardship in the potential for developing that property, right? And so if a variance were to be approved for a given use, if that use were to arise on the property, it would be appropriate for the variance to remain for that use. If there are other uses on the property, in the interim, but that use were to come back, it would then apply. I am applying here some interpretation, right, of why it might be this way.
Right.
There is, I'll tell you the other part of it for the other part of the reason. There is in zoning the concept of a concurrent variance. Now that's usually on a rezoning action, not on something. We don't have concurrent variances in ours. The variances stand alone from the action that they might be attached to. The reason was the attorney that was a consultant to the original author of the zoning that became the zoning that was adopted in 2015. Observed that variances and zoning challenges take different paths through the court. They don't stay attached. And they're different processes. And he recommended that we just not have concurrent variances. I would interpret a concurrent variance to for example, a rezoning. If the rezoning was rescinded, the concurrent actions would also go away. But since we don't have concurrent variances, the variance continues to stand.
And of course, it can only be used if there's a special use permit approved. And so, but as I take it from you, right, we've got these separated into two different packages.
Correct.
One is the special use permit and one is the concept plan. I'm going to propose that we talk about them together. Although when it comes time to vote, we may both, they're presented separately. We vote separately, but I think we should talk about them together. And Mike, it looks to me like your recommendation is with an adjustment for parking. Your recommendation, staff recommendation is approval of the special use permit, but not the concept plan. Am I reading that right?
Essentially correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
I guess the question there would be the question about the special use. Okay, when we look at the code, we look at the comp plan, and we look at the framework, we talk about location, we talk about design, and we also talk about the impact that it's going to have on the zoning district. So because we know that location is one of the highest traffic location within the city, and we look at the design, we know that the design is not in accordance with those regs that I just mentioned, then I guess from my reading, I guess I have a hard time saying that we should approve the special use because it's not in accordance with those regs. So unless some more light could be shined on the situation, I don't see how we could approve that special use knowing that it's not in accordance with that. So when we're making a decision, when we read the criteria, I mean, we're supposed to look at those things. So I don't.
Correct. I will say, of course, I don't have a vote. I'm just
Right.
providing some analysis. My thinking is that there's not a reason why a gas station shouldn't be allowed at that intersection, this high traffic intersection, but that the site should be designed more in accordance with both the parking requirements and the framework plan.
And so Lori, you had a question. I'm sorry, go ahead. You had a question.
That was my question. I don't know how to separate the two.
Right.
Well, let's talk about specifics. I think as I look at it, others ideas on this too, I'm sure. As I look at it, it's the location of the canopy and the location of the buildings that's why you got a variance. They seem to be contrary to what is in either of those plans. And so, in other words, the canopy consistently would be behind the buildings and the buildings would be fronted on the two roads or the back of them or whatever on the two roads with an architectural design that looked like the historic Campbellton Crossroads intent. So I guess I have a question for for you all. Do you have any further thinking about the location of the canopy? Any flexibility there?
So it would be hard to develop a gas station these days with a canopy. Sorry. It'd be hard to develop a gas station these days with a canopy not in the front of a building. That was the logic we brought to the council planning commission when we applied a couple of years back. The logic still stands today. There are some things that we've done to make it not look like it.
You should speak, if you can speak into the microphone, please.
Yeah. The logic of that is that generally gas stations, people come in to not want to go behind buildings to pump gas. It's just a simple way it is. I know a lot of municipalities have tried to move towards canopies in the back, and most municipalities over the years have given variances, because unless it's in a very urban type area where people are used to um, coming around the back and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the building, people just don't like it. And so that's the reason why. The other thing about the canopy is we can make it look in a historic fashion. If you look historically, canopies have always been in front of the gas stations as far back as, they've been gas stations. So I don't think historically it's not keeping with the design of the communities in the past. And with all due respect, we do have a variance, and I think that legally we have that right still to do it. I understand that, you have the right to, try to assist us and give us direction and design, things like that. But really, it's hard to do a gas station these days without having it in front. Just very difficult.
It's not necessarily a question for you, but for the group. So this really is our first activation of a historic crossroad. And when I envisioned I was not on the council or involved in this first decision. I pictured more of something like Smith's store that had a gas pump there. This has got 4 gas pumps, and they're not just lined up. 6? It's got
6.
4 bays.
4 bays.
4 bays.
4 bays.
Right, there are 2 in a row.
On
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
side.
8
Um,
pumps, 16 positions for cars.
The Charlie's gas station across the street has that same configuration. And then during the public hearing, some residents said that they bypass Charlie's and go down to the BP on Fulton Industrial Boulevard, which is owned by the applicant. And I went down there to look at that. And it seems to me that no matter what you do to the canopy, so long as it's in front of the buildings, it's going to obscure the buildings. There was nothing that looked historical about that. And I have to ask myself, I'm in a historic crossroad district in Rico. Would I want this there? This is supposed to be a part of the community. And it looks like this particular project serves the community going through it, not as the foundation of a historic community that's going to happen in the historic Hambleton district. So that's my concern. I don't see a way that this is going to fit our conception of what a historical district is.
Would it fit it if the canopy were in back? And the design of the
If
buildings?
the design was different.
Yeah.
But then here again, the other thing I noticed, wherever you have the canopy, the parking has to be in front of the stores because you're going to walk from the gas pump to go pay.
Mike, you had some thoughts that there could be some limited parking in the front, correct?
So it can be difficult to square with the code. If the canopy were to remain in front, is that
No,
what
no,
you
if it
mean?
were to be in back.
Oh, if the canopy was in back, you would want the parking near there anyway, right?
Right.
So the parking code says there's not to be parking between a building and the street without another intervening building in the way. So if they were to line the street with buildings, have the canopy and the pumps back in the back, and have the parking back in the back, that would fly.
Mr. Chair, to answer that question, I don't think it would still fit the intent. So I feel that this is our opportunity, because this would be the first construction that we're having in a historic district. This is our opportunity as citizens of Chattahoochee Hills to make sure that we use the requirements that are currently in the framework plan. So for me, when I look at location, as far as the special use, I know the code does say that a gas station should be there, but I don't think a gas station should be there. I think we should look at that framework and build a quality town center.
I will point out that in the framework plan, that corner appears to me to be designated as retail. And the code does allow gas stations in historic districts.
Right, I agree.
And so I think that we have a gas station developer here who owns the land and has made a proposal for this. So it is not, it's not that type of developer, I think.
Correct. So I'm not saying that a gas station can't be there, but I guess basically what I was saying was that this is our opportunity to to define that historic district. And I mean, my opinion is that I don't feel that that gas station is going to define the historic district that we should have there.
So
Mhm.
does that mean that with a different design of the gas station, it would work, or just no
And-
gas station?
And go ahead, Laura.
So,
She can go
so
ahead.
I do have that idea. And someone else mentioned, you want to know when you get into Chattahoochee Hills, it wants to scream to you, oh, it's something different. And how many times do we see barns that have two sheds on either side? If you design something like that, where the main part of that barn were your buildings and gas stations, you could have your pumps on either side. The main side would still be facing, the barn side would still be facing the public. You'd see that it's a gas station, but it's not in your face, and it would look totally unique. It would scream Chattahoochee Hills instead of, an extension of Charlie's or what was. Just a thought. I think there's cooler ways to do it.
Any other discussion at this point? Then I would like to suggest that we take a moment with the architectural question, okay? Mike, I think you have some pictures, and the architectural question is not going to be for us, but we can make recommendations to the city council, but the city council does have the right, if it goes forward with this, to actually make some real requirements for with the architectural. But I think it might be helpful to the city council if anyone has any particular strong feelings. I'd like to ask you to take a look at these and see if, and I will say right away, I'm not the guy to do this. This is out of my wheelhouse. So if you all have design, anything that strikes you as that we'd like to suggest to the city council, that if they go forward with this, that they consider this at some point, maybe you can take a look at these, if that's okay with everybody. Is that okay? Will, is that okay with you?
So I do have many, many pictures. Some of these are from 2018 that were considered. These first, they're just a pair in the first set, and they are ones that were actually provided by council members at the time. And so, again, these are each in, I have 3 sets. The next set is based on a bunch of renderings based on a building that the city provided to the applicant as a model last time. So in the front are renderings, and then in the back is a picture of the actual building that we provided. And then the next set of 3
That's closer.
is some buildings that came from a folder titled "From the Applicant," but I know that last building is also included in here. I'm not sure these are all from the applicant, but 2 of them are of McDonald's that don't look like regular McDonald's. We were talking about fast food. So they are a unique implementation of fast food, because we usually think about franchise architecture, right? These next set is a few pictures that were provided by a citizen last time around in 2018 of something that might be a model. And then the next set. So in that discussion in 2018, we kind of came around to a general agreement, I think, among council and the applicant, that the pump canopy would be designed to look like the train stations in Fairburn and Palmetto. And so these are just some photographs taken at the time of train stations in Palmetto and Fairburn. And then I've got a couple pictures. I actually don't have multiple copies. So this building is somewhere in your set. This is the Latham House.
Yes.
That is the building that was there on the site until just before it became a city. It burned down. But this is what was on the site. It would be lovely if we could potentially have something that was that historically authentic. And then finally, a member of the city council drew these buildings. There are 3 of each. And those were actually adopted with the zoning in 2018 it was those buildings that, and the applicant agreed that they would build buildings that look like that, but that's what a member of city council thought the building should look like and got agreement from the applicant. I will say, both in 2018 and this time around, we've heard again and again from the applicant that they are happy to be flexible on the architecture. They care what happens inside the buildings. I think they care where they go, but they are entirely happy to be flexible on the architecture. So there are a lot of different directions you can go and still be historic. I think that if we give them guidance, if they feel like they have a clear message from the city, that we will see and we can request actual renderings from them of what that might look like. I'll also point out too, it's in the memo that city council has approval at the time of building permitting of the actual architecture and the actual final site plan. So there is that last level of making sure it really matches. Again, in the code, the recommendation is provide samples of materials and detailed color renderings, just so we know exactly what to expect out of the proposal.
Thank you, Mike, and Diane, thank you for assisting with this. I think you all take a look at this. We'll re-engage on this during the public hearing and decide how we want to address it, depending on what we do there. I will make this comment that since 2018, when the City Council voted to approve the special use permit and the variance and the concept plan, there's been some changes. One of the changes, more residential, has developed there. And in 2021, the city did adopt the framework, the framework. So there have been some significant changes since that happened. So I think we are done with the working session. Let's take a, yeah,
Oh, we're done talking about this? There's still more to talk about.
there's a lot more to talk about, but we're done with the working session.
Oh, okay.
So we'll readdress it. We'll come back
Okay.
to this when we get to the hearing. And at least that's my suggestion, unless you all want to continue extending the working
I'm
session.
going to continue.
Let's hear what Laurie has to say.
So the whole issue with traffic is another issue. So this didn't meet the threshold for a traffic study, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot of traffic there. It's, I think I read somewhere, the busiest intersection in the city, and by gosh, it is. Stood out there for 5 minutes and just counted it. I think there's safety issues coming in and out of Church Street that might be alleviated if they made it a right turn only. I think it's going to be a huge safety issue if customers coming out of that gas station attempt to turn left. But even so, that traffic on, I always get the streets mixed up. Is that Campbellton? What runs in front of?
Highway
Campbell
92
Fair.
is Campbell.
Highway 92.
Yeah.
So
Campbell
when the
Fair.
traffic light stops and that traffic backs up, it backs up in front of Church Street. You can't get out. And I didn't stay there long enough to wait to see what happens, as it moves, but that wasn't, necessarily during rush hour traffic. I went at 1:15 and by the time I came back around, it was 2:30 and I was surprised he couldn't get out. That's one issue. And the other issue is it looks like there's 2 egress on Church Street and I wonder why. And Church Street's a little bitty street. So I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned that one is adjoins the cemetery. And I'm really concerned about preserving that African-American historic cemetery there. And I know that's in the green space spot. So those are just 2 concerns. I don't know how to address them, but for me, the traffic is almost as big an issue as the look of the thing.
I actually have some other issues too, but I think they can save
can
for the
wait.
hearing.
Okay.
And I think we can readdress these in the hearing too.
Well, I'll second your opinion of the situation. I went there this afternoon, and I parked at Charlie's, I think much like you did. And I was really surprised at the amount of traffic that actually does go through there. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I didn't realize we had that much traffic right there. And then I had entered Charlie's off of Cascade Palmetto, but then came on the other side of Charlie's to get back to Highway 92. You know how you can drive through to the other side. And I was making a right turn. I was not even making a left turn. And I had to sit and wait for quite a time. And even pulling out, like somebody was gracious enough to stop and let me pull out. But I mean, that's making a right-hand turn at that intersection. I mean, it's quite busy. Now, that said, I mean, is another gas station going, well, obviously, if there's more people going in and out across the street, that's gonna create a little more congestion.
More traffic.
You would
And
presume.
there is a traffic circle plan, but there's no set date for the implementation of that.
Sure, calling it planned.
Well, it's in the
But it would, there
it's
would have to be
penciled in.
money for it.
Right.
Thought that would have to happen.
All right, so then there's not a plan.
I think we all agree that traffic is going to be a major problem. Because really, when you go during rush hour, whether it's in the morning or in the evening, I mean, it's a problem. And so traffic is one of the criteria that we look at when we determine whether we should grant approval for the special use permit. Is one of the conditions. Yes.
I'm going to suggest we take a bit of a break here for 5 minutes, and then we will come back and start the public hearing. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. We'll start back with the regular meeting here in